All right, everybody. If you are watching this on Facebook, and I guess I won't know until later, but if you're watching this on Facebook, this is a podcast that I record and publish every Monday for primarily an audience of salespeople that are selling B2B software and technology. And my podcast is called Over Quota. And I typically feature sales leaders, founders. I'll be interviewing some VCs soon, and also individual salespeople who have achieved a certain level of success, and interview them with the thought process of, or the thought of trying to learn from them, and hopefully, the listeners can take the aggregate of that information and to become better salespeople. But today, the reason why I'm streaming this live, or at least I think I'm live, is because I want to talk more about how to help people get jobs in this uncertain time. I mean, obviously the numbers came out again yesterday. I forget exactly what it was, but I think another 2.8 million people filed for unemployment, brings the number to, I believe, over 40 million nationally. And there's just a lot of people out there, a lot of candidates that are out there looking for jobs now. And so this interview that you're about to watch or listen to is focused on exactly that, right? How to differentiate yourself in a job market that is just flat out, just flat out tough, right? It's just a tough job market. So without further ado, I want to introduce you to Don Thorvund. Don Thorvund is the Director of Talent Acquisition for, I'm just realizing this now, by the way, if I'm on Facebook Live. Oops, hold on, I did not mean to do that. Hold on, sorry everybody. No, I don't want to do that. I'm just now realizing that one of the things about going to Facebook Live is I'm sitting there sharing my screen. I don't know, can you see my screen, Don? No? I don't think so. Maybe somebody else can, but nevertheless, let's just roll with it, right? This is what life is all about. So I'm going to read from a script that I always do so that I don't screw this up. But Don Thorvund is the Director of Talent Acquisition for Gainsight, which provides customer success software to empower companies to increase revenue, decrease customer churn, and drive advocacy. Don, welcome to Over Quota.
Thank you for inviting me.
And thanks for doing this, by the way, because you are the quintessential, I guess, or the guinea pig for this. I've never done, I've never actually recorded this live. I asked Don right before we came on if we could do it. He said yes. And so we are doing it. So thank you again. So let's just start with Gainsight for a moment, if you don't mind. Give me a sense, and the audience a sense, of what Gainsight does and provides to the marketplace before we get into the nitty gritty.
In layman's terms, what our software does is it's geared towards subscription services that want to understand the health of their customers. Typically, it's software companies, SaaS companies that want to understand the health of their customers and increase retention and customer advocacy, but it doesn't necessarily have to be software. Especially as we go through this pandemic, the value of retaining your current customers is of increased importance, and hopefully our software helps with that.
And tell me about your role there as the Director of Talent Acquisition.
So I've been with Gainsight about 3.5 years, managing all hiring in the US and the UK. It's been a really fun journey, almost to 4 years. We hire all kinds of different roles in the US. A lot of salespeople, of course, customer success people. It's a wonderful company to work for with a great mission, and it's a lot of fun.
How many people would you say that you onboarded or hired and onboarded over since over the last like 3.5 years or so since you've been there?
Wow. In the US, probably over 250, probably close to 300.
Wow. Okay. And where do you sit in the recruiting process? In other words, are you talking to candidates, or do you have recruiters that are talking to candidates and then they're reporting up to you?
So I do have a team, a small team that reports into me, but I'm very hands-on. It depends on the roles. We do a little bit of load balancing in terms of what roles are open and who works on what roles, but I'm definitely hands-on, meeting with managers, pre-interviewing candidates, and basically managing the whole process to the hire. And, it continues beyond the onboarding, so it's a wonderful situation.
Yeah, that's right. That's a whole, we could do a whole nother episode on that, right? Just in terms of
Definitely.
culture and that type of stuff. Yeah, for sure. And the reason why I wanted to start there is because obviously if people are listening or watching this, I wanted to just give them some foundation as to, why I wanted to have you on and why they should listen. And again, this obviously is the Over Quota podcast. By the way, don't forget to rate, review, and subscribe if you haven't already. But the reason is that it's not just, what we're going to talk about here is not just for salespeople. It's really for anybody that's out there looking for a new opportunity. Which, by the way, includes my wife, right? So we're having these conversations all the time. So at the very top, right? Let's say, for instance, if you were to, you found yourself in need of looking for another opportunity Monday, let's just say, right? What would be some of the steps that you would take initially to start your job search, to start that journey?
For me personally, and I think it's true for anybody that's looking for a job, it's good to develop a strategy. And that strategy typically depends on which roles you're looking for. So maybe take a couple of days, take a break, maybe not on Monday, but Wednesday, sit back and decide what roles really of our interest to me. And oftentimes in our career, we'll find that there's different types of roles, and there's also different versions of the roles, being individual contributor or manager or such. Take assessment of what I want to do, or what anybody wants to do, is always a really good first step. Once you have those goals or those targets, then it makes it a little bit easier to kind of develop a strategy. One thing I am surprised about, I have done a lot of meeting with impacted people that were impacted by the virus. We do a lot of philanthropic work, and I've met with a lot of people that are looking for help with their career searches. People don't realize you can do different job searches at the same time. You don't have to focus on one particular role. And the best strategy for doing that is to develop what I like to think of as a master resume, a resume with just everything listed in it, from top to bottom at each role. I am partial to bullet points on a resume because it's easier to manipulate, and it's also easier to see from a recruiting standpoint. But once I have that master resume, then I'd look at the roles that I decided were of interest to me, and I'd adjust it accordingly. I might have 5 or 6 different versions of my resume. Maybe one leans more towards managerial roles and the other ones lead more towards individual contributors, or maybe it's based on verticals. Whatever is important to me and how I would differentiate those. You don't have to have one version of the resume. Like when I started 25 years ago, everybody had one resume. We don't have to do that anymore. After I developed that, the next thing I would do is take that master resume and go back to my LinkedIn and update my LinkedIn, make sure it's accurate, make sure it lists all those things on that master resume. While a resume, you would tend to want to be a little bit more focused for the roles that you're interviewing or applying to. LinkedIn, you just have one profile, so that has to be your master. And I can tell you, in 25 years of talent acquisition, obviously LinkedIn wasn't around the entire time, but since LinkedIn has been around, I've never had a manager say, "Oh my goodness, that person's LinkedIn profile was too robust or too full." I see it all the time where it's too sparse, but that is something that I would do on this right afterwards. And then I would probably visit Glassdoor as another resource. People think of Glassdoor often as a review of employers, and it's great for that. It's great to look at how the employees view a company. But the first thing I would do on Glassdoor is create my profile on Glassdoor, because they use that profile to send you jobs that may be of interest to you. And the more robust that profile is, the more likely the jobs they're sending to you are going to match what you're interested in. Now, as an employer, we can't view your profile. We're not going to search you on Glassdoor. So keep that in mind, that it's really for your use to help the jobs come to you. I think those would be the big ones. Also on Glassdoor, you can look at not just the employer reviews, but you can go in and look at the interview reviews, which kind of give you an idea of what a company's like when it's interviewing people.
Very interesting. I don't know if I knew that. So if I have a profile on Glassdoor, I could actually search and get insight into how the interview process goes, or typically in terms of maybe the people that you might meet with, not necessarily by name, but by title, and maybe just the overall process, whether there's a presentation, those types of things. Is that right?
Yeah, it's interesting. From a candidate point of view, I think most humans are a little bit nervous when we go to an interview. That's completely normal. But what we fail to remember is the interviewer is often nervous too.
Hmm.
And the more information that we have about the process, the more comfortable we become and the more we can be ourselves during an interview. And in reality, an interview is just a way to determine, does this role fit me and do I fit that role? And the more you are yourself, the better you're going to present yourself at an interview.
Yeah, that's something I want to talk about in a little bit as well. But let me just back up for a second, just to go to the resume. Number one, sitting in your seat or even with one of your recruiters, how much time do you give to a resume that comes across, right? However that might be. And then also talk to me about length of a resume, because we get that question all the time in terms of how long should my resume be? Is it too long? What are your thoughts?
Well, there's no silver bullet to a resume. There's no one resume that's going to be perfect for every scenario, and that's something to keep in mind. That's one of the reasons I suggest having different resumes for different roles that you're interested in. How much time a recruiter spends on a resume to review is going to be dependent on a couple of factors. One is the role, how senior the role is, how technical the role is, how much do you have to dig down. The experience of the recruiter and the knowledge of the recruiter of that particular role. I know when I first start recruiting on roles that may be new because we invented the role or it's just not a role that I'm familiar with, it takes me more time. Going through a resume from a very entry-level junior position can be as a minute roughly, which doesn't sound great, but if it's an entry-level role, you should be able to say, hey, this is spot on, I don't need more time. And it could go 5 minutes, 6 minutes, 7 minutes, depending on how deep you have to dig into that resume, or if it's more technical, that's part of what you need to do.
An entry-level resume, when you say spot on, what would be, because with an entry level, by definition, they don't have that much direct experience. So are there more, I guess, indicators that you would look for in an entry level resume than say relevant experience? In other words, indicators of leadership, indicators of overachievement. Like what are some of the, I don't know, soft skills that might be evident there?
I think when you're more of an entry-level role, the things that you've done extracurricular in your education career or volunteer work at local communities, these things play a much greater role. Not that they're not important in more experienced roles, but when you're entry-level, that's what you have, and that's what you have to work with. So you want to highlight the skill set that you think would be relevant to the job. I had a conversation like this with someone that was a recent, just came out of the armed forces and had great experience, but didn't know what to put on their resume. I'm like, think about everything you've done. I mean, you've done far more than most people do in college in terms of responsibility. Let's talk about those things and let's get them listed, because that's going to be something that an employer is going to look for. Are you responsible? Can you handle managing things that would probably scare a lot of people? So it was very important. I didn't answer your question on length of resume because I don't think there's a golden rule. I do not think a one-page resume is a great answer. However, if you're very early in your career, one page might fit. Jay, you're probably a little younger than myself. I don't know if I'd be able to fit everything on one page, so it would be probably challenging to read a resume that I wrote that would be one page. It would just look very confusing and it would be hard on the eyes. So you want to try to be in alignment with your experience.
You mentioned hard on the eyes. One of the questions that I have is when someone submits a resume through one of the resume portals, I guess, if you will, whether it's ZipRecruiter or Indeed or something like that, what happens to the resume after I hit submit? Everybody wants to know that, like, it goes into this mysterious abyss, so to speak, like,
black hole.
This black hole, and you don't know, and you can sit there and hope that somebody sees it, number one, likes it, number two, and then reaches out to you, number three. What happens with all that, and how should we should our resumes be written for the human eye as far as seeing it, or the computer that might screen it out, with AI, all the AI technology that's prevalent?
So what happens when you hit the mysterious apply button is your resume is taken from whichever source you've applied, be it an Indeed, a LinkedIn, a Glassdoor, what other tools you happen to be using. It's transferred to the company's applicant tracking system. which is an important piece to remember. Resumes that are going to be a little bit easier on the eyes are also going to be able to be input into that applicant tracking system a little bit more easily. If you can read a resume pretty clearly, there's a good chance that it'll go into the system very cleanly. It's called parsing. And at that point, what the applicant tracking system does is try its best to figure out your name, your education, your experience, and it pre-populates fields. So you do want to have resumes that are very clean. It helps you get beyond that. It's not that it will get filtered out. I'm not aware of anybody that will be filtering resumes at that point, but you want to make sure that it's readable when it gets to the applicant tracking system. Some things that are kind of triggers that can be challenging for applicant tracking systems are if you go to resumes that are formatted in sometimes really fun and unique ways. I see it a lot with marketing candidates with great graphs or logos that are, images or clip art on a resume. It doesn't translate well to that parsing experience. So it's something to keep in mind. That might be a great resume to take to or share with as a portfolio with a marketing or creative person. Mm-hmm. But you definitely want to make sure that it is clean enough to go into the applicant tracking system. Once it's in that system, almost every company will have a recruiter lay eyes on and determine, does it fit the basic requirements of the roles that I'm looking for? And if it passes the recruiter review, then it's usually shared with a hiring manager and determine, do we move forward or do we pause at that point?
You mentioned having a master resume before and then having, various resumes depending on experience. In terms of, or target, like what you're trying to do, mm-hmm. What about just something as basic as, again, sticking to the resume reading, keywords, right? We've heard those as well. Like, are those important? Because you mentioned you want it to be readable, and so that if it's digestible by a human, it's going to be probably well received by a parsing system. But mm-hmm. how cognizant should we be of some of the keywords, I guess, that we should be using?
I think it's a very good point. When an application or a resume is coming into an applicant tracking system, there are companies that will hold on to your resume and go back to that database often to look at your resume and search for those keywords. That happens more typically with a recruiting agency rather than in-house. Although we do it. A challenge is, Jay, you may apply for my position today, and then a year from now, I might be looking for something, and your resume is a year old. The most accurate way I can look for you and your experience would be on LinkedIn, because you're actively on LinkedIn and updating it. So these rules kind of apply both to your resume and to LinkedIn. You definitely want to have tools you've worked with, so they're searchable. If you've worked with Salesforce or any other software packet, you want to make sure that those are there and readable. If you're in a role that is customer facing, you want to make sure that you have description of the customer. Is it an enterprise customer? Is it a small mid-market customer? These are very important items to have listed in your resume, because as a recruiter or anybody that's looking for your resume, if I'm looking for, say, a great account executive, I'm going to look for somebody that's on the enterprise side. The first word I'm going to put in besides account executive is enterprise. Now that may mean different things to different people in terms of the levels, but those words have to be there. And it depends on the role too. If it is a salesperson, I'm going to look for words like quota, president's club, these kind of things that really show, hey, that's a very strong salesperson. So make sure you put those on your resume. It's not going to hurt you. If it's a customer success role, I'm definitely going to look for what vertical, what segment size, how many people they had on their desk that they managed. Don't be afraid to put data. Attainment versus quota is great for salespeople. I will put the word quota into a search if it's a salesperson, because there should be some mention of quota on their resume. So they are important on both sides.
Yeah, it's funny. I was giving advice to someone recently. I think I actually created a YouTube video about it, which is to, if you're going to put your resume together, think about it not necessarily like you're writing it as a job description, but you're writing it like a resume. I feel like a lot of resumes that are written basically, this is what I've done and this is what I do, but not necessarily the results that I've achieved for doing it. And a lot of people fall into that pitfall. In salespeople, I mean, obviously everything is quantifiable, where other positions might not be. They might be more qualitative, but you're right. In terms of quota attainment, those are questions that I ask people all the time, right? And because there's foundation to it, and you want to make sure that there's a lot of relevancy there. for sure, even as something as simple as deal size. If somebody was selling a $10,000 deal and your company is selling $100,000 deals on average, the sales motion is probably going to be different. It might not be a good fit, right? So those things
Sales
matter.
cycle is a good example of the same thing.
Yep.
They're beautiful terms to put in there, and they're going to. The thing about resumes and about LinkedIn is when you're using those terms, they're never going to hurt you. They're only going to help you. So, you know, having them there are just going to pop you up on the search of the sharp recruiters that are looking for the top tier candidates in that field. So you definitely want to be in that group.
Yes, that's right. That's right. And speaking of reach out, I mean, if let's say, well, how should someone go about applying to increase the likelihood that they are going to, I was going to say get a response. Yeah, even just get a response, right? I mean, let's just start there, like a human response, if you will.
So that's a tricky thing because it's different with every company. My philosophy in talent acquisition has always been that everybody needs a response from me. They've taken the time to investigate my company. They've taken the time to investigate the role. They've reached out and submitted, which is that's a big step. That means, hey, I like your company enough that I'm going to invest my career with you. They need a response. And at a certain level, once I've spoke to someone live, or any of my team members have spoken to somebody live, we always make sure, however the process goes, we reach out and close that with a phone call, or in a way that's very personal to that person. So I think that there's a personal touch that we add at Gainsight that I wish more recruiting teams did. That being said, it's not always the case. I have found that a great way is always networking, of course, networking using user groups. There's a ton of groups around depending on the roles that people are interested in. LinkedIn has got great groups. As we move to more of a work from home environment, attending those meetings is going to become so incredibly simple for us. We don't have to go get dressed up and go to the, for the drinks on the town and make it a whole evening. We can spend a couple hours on Zoom and get to know people. I think that's a great resource. And then you have a contact in whatever company you're looking for. I think it's absolutely fine to look on LinkedIn and get, oh, hey, I'm applying for a sales role. This is the chief revenue officer. I might drop them a note and say, hey, I'm very interested in your company. Ask for an informational interview. You can tell a lot about a company by the type of response you get. You may not get a response every time, but all this, you're getting farther than a lot of people do. Now, I expect salespeople to always be closing and always be doing that, but it's a great tool that can be used by everybody else. And in terms of recruiting, if you just submitted your resume, you want to make sure that they've received it. It's absolutely okay to look on a LinkedIn and determine who's in talent acquisition and follow up with an email.
Let me ask you this. Let's say, for instance, if I'm interviewing for a operations, let's just say sales operations, right? I'm interviewing for a sales ops role, or I'm applying for a sales ops role. I see the director of sales operations or head of sales operations, and I see talent acquisition manager, director of talent. Who should I be directing my application or resume to?
It's a great question, and it really depends on the culture of the company. There's going to be, I don't think you're going to go wrong reaching out to the director of sales operations. I think that's always a great first reach out. I will be honest, people that aren't always looking for jobs aren't always managing their LinkedIn account. So if you don't get a response, don't feel like it was a bad response. It just may be that person's especially overwhelmed right now and not able to respond to every email that they receive. So I would do first the role, and then second the HR component or the talent acquisition, or you could do both at the same time, Jay. There's really no reason why not.
I'm chuckling a little bit because it's funny, like as I have these private conversations with my wife, as I try to advise her throughout these things, I'm chuckling because I'm like, I wonder if she's watching this on Facebook right now, because it's so much better when it comes from somebody else.
Same thing that you probably are telling her, right?
Yeah, it's just great, I'm like, yes.
You love your spouse or significant other. There's a couple of things you probably shouldn't have conversations with. Probably job advice, probably how to ride a bicycle or drive a stick shift or learn a foreign language. Leave those to professionals. That's okay.
That's right. That's right. So true. So true. The funny thing is that she was asking me if I knew how to drive stick when we met, because I needed to drive one of her cars with stick. So that's a whole nother story. The answer was yes, by the way, just so you know. So what about, I always get into the tactics of this as well, because I'm trying to get into the minds of, again, someone who's going through this stress. And what I'm trying to do is de-stress that whole process, right, for people, and to really get down into like the tactical level. So if I'm sending that email, say to the director of sales operations, okay, talk to me a little bit about how it should be structured, right? Because I don't want to lead the question. Talk to me about how it should be, how you're thinking it should be structured, and that could be in terms of length, in terms of what you should include in the message. What are your thoughts on that?
So, you know, when we have all been on the recipient side of an email from LinkedIn, either from a recruiter or somebody that wanted to network, first thing I think of when I think of an email is get to the point pretty quick. You know, don't have 3 or 4 paragraphs with the end, hey, I'm really interested in working for your company. I think it's good to research the person and research the company and hit those, hey, I'm very interested in working for Gainsight because of what you're doing and customer retention, and these are great things, and I've followed your career. I see you've worked here and there. We kind of cross paths in this way or that, or we've studied under the same universities or what have you. Make a connection as quickly as possible and get to the point with a position that is in the field. I think that that's the best approach. So structure it in such that you have knowledge of the role, you have knowledge of the company and why you're interested, and that you're reaching out and submitting your resume.
Let's say they've succeeded at that and it's time to engage, right? Like they're now about to have the phone call or the Zoom meeting. At a high level, how should they, let me ask you this. What are you looking for in terms of whether it's behaviors, whether it's traits, whether it's relevant experience? If this is the first sort of, this is the initial conversation you're having with the candidate, what are you trying to get or understand?
Yeah, you know, there's a couple of things you're looking for during that first phone call. And my mindset has always been, I have the best job in the whole wide world. My job is to simply explain each role to the candidate, the company to the candidate, and help them make a decision. Is this the right role for you in your career? If I'm doing anything less than that, they're going to maybe make a bad decision. So my job in all of these roles is just to help us together, not a grill session, but help us together come up to that solution. So I'm looking for a few things. It's not going to be where I ask one question and they tell me for 30 minutes all about their background, because guess what? At the end of that, I know they have no interest in what the role is or what my company is. So it has to go both ways. I'm looking for somebody that is somewhat knowledgeable. I don't expect them to know everything about the company or about the role, but somewhat knowledgeable, eager to hear more about it, eager to have an exchange of ideas and have good listening skills to understand where the conversation is going. I have a resume, and my job is not to verify that it is a accurate resume. I have to go with an assumption that it is accurate. So that the second part of that is to have a true conversation, just like you and I are having. Does this seem like a fit for Jay? Is it a fit for his wife? You know, where are we going? Let me explain it to him. So I think what I'm looking for are those skills. I'm definitely looking for knowledge and understanding of some of the skills that are associated with the role. Again, it's dependent upon the role. You know, the more technical the role is, I am going to have to dig a little deeper. Do they have these skill sets? If it's an ops role, what have they done in operations that's important? If it's a sales role, what's their understanding of a sales cycle? What kind of deals have they done? You know, just to get an understanding of those technical pieces. But a lot of it is kind of the soft skills. It's probably 50-50, Jay, really, to see. And it's important that it's an exchange of ideas. And if it feels like that's not happening, like they're not coming out and talking and just listening, that's okay. But I do want to hear their point of view. And on the other hand, I got to be able to ask them questions as well. So talking too much can be a little bit of a red flag.
You mentioned talking too much. Is that the biggest mistake you see people making? And if so, what are some other mistakes that you see people make? And if not, what is the biggest mistake?
I think the biggest mistake on a phone interview or a video screen with a talent acquisition is just not knowing what the company does. Really basic things. Basic things of what the company does, basic understanding of the role, and lack of listening. Those are probably the biggest ones. If you're doing any of those things, probably a little bit of a red flag. You know, I think too, we're in a situation where a lot of people are working from home. You and I were joking before we went on camera that we both had the same conversation with our children. Hey, we're going to be live. Let's try to keep interruptions to a minimum. But you know what? It's life. We're right now in a situation that wasn't planned, and those things happen. If they happen, don't panic and let it ruin the rest of your phone interview or video conversation. Roll with it. We all have interruptions. We're all in a situation we weren't really geared for. So I think it's also a good opportunity to kind of, you know, show that you can roll with those things. So don't panic about the little things. Focus on making sure that it's a fit for you. And that is that exchange of ideas. And if you're doing those things, you're probably going to be okay.
You mentioned 50-50 soft skills to hard skills. It's interesting. I put something on LinkedIn yesterday. I had been looking for a word cloud really to crystallize all that I've been hearing from the sales leaders that I've been interviewing. And because people have, like, each salesman will manager that I bring on will ask me, like, well, you know, what are other sales leaders saying? Like, what are they saying? And I'll talk to candidates and they'll say, what's the typical common thread? And it's very hard for me to find a common thread. But as I was listening to the last one that I just posted, one of the things that I realized is that nobody has said anything about hard skills. It's always been, I'll say to them, like, talk to me about your, you know, the difference between the best salespeople that you've managed and everybody else, or the people that have struggled. And I'll ask every sales manager that, sales leader that question. And to a person, they've all given me soft skills that were the differences, right? And I don't know if it's just that we should go under the assumption, and I'm going to start asking them this question because I really don't know the answer, but should we go under the assumption that the baseline is that you already have the hard skills? In other words, you've already come with the hard skills. That's already assumed that in the best salespeople that we've led, right? They have relevant experience to the industry or the sales process, or, you know, those types of things. And then the soft skills are just sort of the cherry on top of that. So the word cloud that I put on LinkedIn just basically had soft skills in big, bold font, and then a red line, and then underneath it was just soft skills in a very sort of, you know, nondescript sort of font, right? And then it was just a promo, frankly, for promoting this podcast over quota. But beyond that, because again, that's my world, which is sales. What I heard you say is it's 50-50, hard skills and soft skills, depending on, like you said, how technical the role is and those types of things. Is that right?
Yeah, you know, one other kind of parameter is what part of the interview cycle they're in. If you're early stage, yeah, I'm going to be making sure, all right, I need someone that is, you know, familiar with a CRM. Maybe it's Salesforce, maybe it's Microsoft, whatever it happens to be. You know, there's going to be some review of those hard skills that are necessary. When they get to farther down the line, maybe after the first manager phone interview, the majority of what they're focusing on is going to be, hey, what are their soft skills? What are their enthusiasm levels? What are their aptitude to learn? What experiences have they had? These are not hard things that you, especially in a sales role, that you can't, it's very hard to list it as a hard skill. It's not something you, well, there's plenty of sales schools out there. So maybe it is something that you can go to a sales school for. But in reality, when I talked to a hiring manager, and we had our, we had a real wonderful conference that we do for customer success last month, or actually it was this month. It's almost June now. And I got together with some of our customer success leaders, and we were talking about these topics, what happens during an interview. And we put together a chat room for people that were looking. The question came up, even in customer success manager roles, are the hard skills or the soft skills more important? And every single one of them said it's the aptitude and the enthusiasm.
Okay.
And then of course for us, the empathy for the customer. But I mean, that's a role that you would think there's very hard skills that are coded into that. But at that point, by the time it reaches that leader, that's what they're going to be looking for, and especially on sales roles. So I think it depends on the part of the process they're in, Jay.
Yeah. Okay. That makes sense. I like that you sort of broke that down for sure. You mentioned having a dialogue, right? A back and forth dialogue, the way that we're having now. One of the concerns that a lot of, or I guess what stresses people is, what questions should I ask? Like, what questions shouldn't I ask, and those types of things. And to your point, you don't want somebody that's going on for a half hour and showing no interest in learning a bit about the role. Talk to me about what the mindset of the candidate should be in terms of the questions that they should be asking, what things that the way that they ask indicate a certain level of interest. It gets you as a hiring manager or somebody who's making these decisions enthused about moving them forward to the next round of interviews and so forth.
So I have hired at Gainsight, and before this in other companies, great companies as well. In 3.5 years, 250, 300 people roughly. It means I have interviewed a lot more than I probably care to list, but they're all great conversations. My favorite question is still the same question I get: what brought you to this company? Mm-hmm. And my journey, it tells me that they're interested in my take on it. It tells me that they're interested. What does this company have to offer me? What is important about this company? I love those questions. I love any questions about our culture. It tells me that the person is looking, has looked at the role and is now looking beyond. How am I going to fit? And now they're starting to picture themselves in that role with the company. What's the team like? Where are they located? Who do I interact with? These are great questions, and they apply to any role. What will I learn? You know, you get paid a lot of ways in a role in our careers. Obviously, we have a financial part that we have to maintain to make sure we are living the lifestyle that we have grown accustomed to. But the other part is, what are we going to learn? What's going to make us excited? And I think as people go through their career, different times, different things become exciting to us.
What about questions that are off limits? Are there any? Or
I am sure there
that
are
just
off
maybe,
limits.
you know, it's not time to ask them. Yeah, that's a pretty loaded question, I guess, but maybe it's the wrong time to ask a question. Or what do you?
You know, we are so transparent as a company that I can't think there's a ton that would be, if you're asking me about my culture, if you're asking me about how important it is, I share our employee resource groups with our candidates. Here's our employee resource groups. This is what's important to us as a company. If you want to talk to them, I'll set up those appointments so you can talk to them and get to know who we are. So anything socially, culturally, I think they're great questions. Anything in terms of salary, hey, that's fine, that's fair game. Ask those questions, because let's be fair, we're not all going to fit in the role, and somebody's expectations may not meet the budget, and vice versa. And it's okay to have those questions early on, because it's an important piece of the puzzle. Questions that may be out of realm are probably related to whether the company's public or private. There's certain things we can't divulge at certain times, and a lot of salespeople will ask you, "What's the revenue? What's some of those things?" Yes, we'll get to after you sign an NDA and we have you in house or on video, and we're at that level, and we'll go into detail. So those questions probably you can ask them, and you know, hopefully the company will treat them appropriately and update you when we get to those. But there's not too many questions, to be honest with you, Jay, that would be off-putting unless they were extremely personal or something of that matter. We're just a very transparent company.
Okay, you mentioned salary is okay, which I think a lot of people are
nervous about.
Yeah, nervous about asking because they are concerned about the way it might make them look, I suppose. What about, you mentioned culture. What about a work from home culture or flexibility, which is another way for saying work from home? And of course, in this environment, everything's up in the air, I suppose, right? But I guess pre-COVID, and maybe when we're in some sort of normal 5 years from now, again, is that appropriate to ask? Is how many days can I work from home? Or,
yeah, I honestly, Jay, I think things are going to change after this situation. I think there's going to be a lot of companies more open to it. There's a lot of challenges with working from home from our point of view as working from home, but also from a management point of view in terms of leadership. And, you know, we're very fortunate in the way that this has brought this topic up to such an easy forefront for everybody to speak to. I would maybe bring it up if I wasn't sure of the company's cultures. How are you handling this work from home, and how do you see this playing out in the future? Right there, you're going to get your answer, and it's not stating a stance for you one way or another. If that's something that makes you nervous. Before, you know, I always think it's a great question. We're very fortunate in that we have always embraced work from home. We call them everywhere Gainsters, and our headquarters isn't one place, it's wherever you happen to be, which is an awesome way. But I'll tell you, even having a culture where in the US, probably 80% of our population has been remote or work from home, Shifting to a required work from home is a little bit of a challenge. There's things that come up you don't think about. What about security? What about, keeping people engaged? How do you handle people that may have children that are trying to educate their children at home too? There's a lot of questions that come up, and just asking how that company is dealing with that will tell you what their culture has been in the past, what their mindset is now, and what they're thinking in the future. Although, don't be surprised if you ask that question and companies just don't know what the future holds right now. I think there's going to be some sort of mix. I would be very surprised if there's companies out there that their culture will be, once this is over, we're going to go 100% back to everybody in the office. I think there's going to be some sort of blend, and it might be based on the roles, right?
Yeah, and frankly, based on municipal capacity levels that they say are okay, right? In other words,
yeah.
Region of the country or state that says you have to, your office can't be more than 50% capacity. I was talking to somebody actually at the Broad Institute here in Cambridge, Massachusetts, who was saying that they're going to have teams of people when they start to come back, which is like team one will go in from this period of time in the morning to this particular time in the afternoon, and then the other folks will go in. And then I suggested maybe even to do like every other day type of thing, like team one goes in Monday, Wednesday, and Friday or something, and team two goes in Tuesday and Thursday for a while. It's a very interesting dynamic we're going to have.
It's going to be interesting to watch how companies deal with it and approach it. And, I think you can't think that you're going to come out and hit a home run right out of the park, right? There's the companies that I would probably be more drawn to are the ones that realize that, hey, we're going to shoot for it, but if it's not right, we're going to adjust course, and we're going to figure out what works for everybody. And that's a mindset that I really think is going to be important as we try to shift back to a normal environment.
That's right. We got to use air quotes for that normal for quite a while.
Yeah.
By the way, just to plug, if you're watching live on Monday, you will be able to, my podcast is coming out that I interviewed Ryan Burke, who is the former SVP of international sales for a company called Envision App. And they had, I think, 850 employees worldwide without a headquarters. There is no headquarters. They're a unicorn, right? The proverbial unicorn, $1 billion valuation, and they don't have. He called it a work from anywhere culture, and so that interview focuses all on how they did it. Going from startup to unicorn, fully distributed. So for people that are out there curious about how to actually scale that kind of an environment and some of the pitfalls and all that stuff, I implore you to listen to that one that's coming up on Monday, which I think is June 1st. How about wrapping up an interview? Like, what are some of the what's appropriate, I guess, if you will, if you're a candidate and you want to sort of end on a certain note that says, I want this job, or whatever. I don't know.
It's a great question, because when I prep people that are going to be interviewing, sometimes, God, we're all so nervous. We don't want to ask the tough questions, but it's obviously a great question to ask, and it's your only chance to ask it is, how did I do? Do you have any questions or concerns? Do you see any shortcomings? And you got to figure out a way to ask this question that fits you, right? Make it your own. Because as we talk, we will all forget certain aspects, or we'll forget that story that demonstrates X or Y. And asking the recruiter is really your last chance. And if you haven't missed anything, it's your chance to really highlight those great things that you felt were really strong indicators that you would be a good fit for that role. And it's a beautiful time to ask at the end, because as we all close, that's the last thing we remember. Also, what are the next steps? Jay, what do I expect at this point? And timeframes. I think that those are absolutely great questions. If you're a salesperson and you're not closing that interview at the end of the interview,
right,
I'd be a little nervous.
Yes, that's right. It really is. I used to prep my candidates all the time about that. I actually created a document for various ways of appropriately closing, depending on, again, to your point, personality type and those types of things, and certain word tracks. I stopped actually doing it after a while, after recruiting more senior salespeople, let's say people that are more seasoned. It wasn't as necessary. But also, if you don't do it inherently, then I shouldn't be preparing you to do that, right? Obviously, you're not the right candidate if you're going for a sales job and you can't close on next steps and that type of thing. So one of the things that I feel gives, go ahead.
I think you just hit on a very beautiful point. There are certain things that you want to have people do. And while I'm talking to you or helping a candidate with their resume, I'll give you everything I can. But during an interview, the last thing I want to do is prep you to get past the next interview. I'll give you all the information about who you'll interview, what they'll cover, those kind of things, but I'm not going to give you the answers. You need to have that inherently in yourself, and your desire to go do research if you don't know, and do those things, because every step of the way, everything that you've done to prepare for each resume is going to shine and take you a step above your competition. And unfortunately, 40 million people right now, there's going to be a competition for any role that's open.
That's right. And you have to be able to figure out ways to differentiate yourself given that, right? And when you have, by the way, this information that Don's sharing today, the reality is, and it's a sad reality, is that most people, A, don't have this information, and B, even people that have this information don't necessarily use the information, right? So if you can just simply listen to this kind of advice and then put it into action, actually use it, you're going to be farther along, much farther along than people that are your peers, so to speak, that are interviewing and applying for the same jobs, for sure.
100%.
I want to go back to something you said in the beginning. I don't know why I'm thinking of it at the end, towards the end here, but just something that's important for people to just think about from a mindset standpoint, which is that it's not a grill. You said you're not out to grill anybody. Talk to me about that, because I feel like people end up, I think bad interviews happen, or I'll say candidates don't do well in interviews a lot of times because they are tighter than they would normally be, because they're nervous and those types of things. They're often defensive. If, again, let's say they've applied for a number of jobs, they've gotten turned down, and they're just really feeling down. And I feel like a lot of candidates go into these interviews almost like it's me versus you type of situation, and that I don't want to, show any of my warts, and I got to show my best and all this other stuff. And talk to me about, or in the candidates about, like, that it's not a grill, right? That we're on your side, right? The hiring managers, the talent acquisition folks, like, we want you to do well, right?
No, 100%. My job is to find the best candidates for my hiring teams and my company. I am rooting for everybody. The second I'm dialing the number or jumping on the Zoom call, I am rooting for you. I am here to help. I'm answering questions. I want you to be successful. Again, like we talked about, I'm not going to give you the answers. I'm going to help coach you around to get that information, but it's not our job to exclude you. Oh my goodness, if that was my job, that would be crazy hard.
Right.
And quite depressing, to be honest with you. I wouldn't be in this industry for so long. I enjoy seeing people succeed, and we all are nervous. And I can tell you, being on the other side, watching managers, they get nervous too. I have to help coach them. These are topics to cover. Here's how to do it. And connect with the person, talk to them. Obviously not about certain things that you can't ask a candidate, but connect with them about what makes you excited about doing this particular function? What drew you to it? And think about how that draws other people. And you're making a human connection. We're rooting for you. We want you to succeed. I am probably the biggest cheerleader of my company, and I'm trying to keep it pretty low key for this interview. But sometimes it's hard. But I want you to love my company. I want you to come work for us. And so we're here to help. It's normal. Recognize that, hey, there's a little bit of nerves involved, but I'm going to be okay. If it's the right company for me, I'm going to feel it.
Yeah, I mean, you mentioned it. Like, we don't want to. Who wants to deliver bad news? Nobody, right? It's just not what you want to do. Unfortunately, that just by law of averages, sitting in our seats, you're delivering more bad news than not, just because that's just the way that it works, right? There's only so many seats in a particular company. There's only so many seats for a particular. And the more senior you are, there's even less seats, right? If you're management or an executive, right? There's just even less seats. And by the way, the hiring managers, the last thing they want to do is be going through a recruiting process and interviewing people, right? Like, they are on your side too, right? They want to get the recruitment process over with, put that person in the seat so that they can be more productive and focus on their existing team or the other initiatives that they have. And this thing right here, that's an open position, is just a thorn in their side that they would rather not deal with. So they're like, please do well, right?
100%. We talk about that. It's almost like you were in all the team meetings for hiring. That is definitely the goal, is to get the right person in.
I Zoom bombed you. Yeah. you just didn't know it. I was there.
It's a lot of fun, the hiring process. You know, one of the things that I tell every candidate that I speak to, and I try to encourage my team to do the same, is look, not every role is going to fit every candidate. And it doesn't mean that the candidate is a bad candidate or the role is a bad role. It's the two have to fit together. And, you know, being okay with that not being the case takes a lot of pressure off. You know, when you're going into an interview, you have to realize your job is just as much understanding the role and seeing if it fits you. And it's okay for you to part the way through, say, you know what, this doesn't feel like a strong fit for me too. Know that you have that power, and it takes so much pressure off.
That's right. Yep, absolutely. It's so true. Just a couple of more questions here, because I know we're coming up on the hour. I feel like you and I could talk about this. Yeah, I was going to. You and I, we could probably do like 5 episodes with this because we just like it so much. But so how the wrap up, or I should say, beyond the wrap up, the follow up, the thank you email. How should I ask this question? What's a reasonable time frame within someone should actually send the resume? Like how long shouldn't they wait, I guess, is the question. Like, in other words, if I wait 24 hours, is that good? But if I wait 36 hours, that's less good. You know, should I send it almost immediately? And then also, again, to the tactics of it, how should I structure that follow-up or that thank you email? Is there something in particular that you kind of want to hear? Just give me a sense of the thought process and the way you're thinking in that.
So, yeah, surprisingly, I receive so few thank you notes compared to the number of people that I interview. When I receive one, it's such an awesome thing to get one. You're like, yes, yes, this was a good candidate, right? I would honestly say less than 10% of the time I receive a thank you note. So if you want to separate yourself, a thank you note's a wonderful thing. Again, the length of it's going to depend on who you were interviewing with. You know, obviously, if it's a recruiter, it's probably not going to be a big long thing. If it's a team member where you started to really discuss some of the mechanics of the role, maybe there's a little bit more information you're going to add in there. But really what you should do is thank the person for their time, maybe summarize what you've learned or what interested you in the role or the company or what have you. And especially if you're a salesperson, Jay, call to action. You know, what are the next steps? Where are we moving? Hopefully you've covered that in the phone interview or the video interview. Which is a whole nother topic too, is because a lot of hiring is now going to be done over Zoom, and how do you get prepared for those too? But a call to action, a thank you note it's the right thing to do. It's, you know, polite and professional, and it gives you an opportunity to clear up anything that you may have thought you did wrong on the interview, or hey, I hit these points. I really should have added this and this. I can kind of add them in just a little bit here, and then call to action. So I think timing, I typically see thank you notes. You know, I get them sometimes right after the interview, and it's clear that the person hadn't put a lot of thought, but I still am so appreciative of receiving one. Take a little bit. It's okay, 24 hours to get that out. I would say that's probably a good rule of thumb. Again, don't write a manuscript and send it, but depending on who you spoke with, it's always great. And I can tell you from a hiring manager point of view, when they tell me that they've received a thank you note, they love it. They all love it. There's not a single one that said, oh my goodness, this person wrote to me to thank me. What? That's bad. I've never heard that in my career.
I'd love to get data on that. Like, in other words, how many people that write that write the thank you note receive an offer versus people who don't write thank you notes, you know, get an offer, I guess. Like, I wonder what the percentage difference would be.
I would love to go back and look at that too. My gut feeling is the ones that, because what happens is when you receive, there's an excitement level that happens when you receive that note, and you're exciting the hiring team too. They're getting excited that this person's interested. They understand where we're coming from, and sometimes clarification to anything that may have come up. It's just a wonderful thing to do. And sometimes you don't have the email addresses of the the more senior people that you interviewed with, it's
Right.
100% okay to send it to the recruiting team. They will forward it on. There's no reason they're not going to.
Okay, good to know. Good to know. What about if you don't get? Should we not expect a reply to the thank you note? And you know, is that okay? I guess we feel nervous if we don't get a reply.
You know, should it be expected? You know, here's again, my mindset is if somebody's taking the time to sit down and write a thank you note, well, it's the golden rule. Write back and say, hey, I received it. Thank you. If it's something I'll pass along, I'm going to pass it along. That's absolutely fine. Will it happen 100% of the time? You won't get a response 100% of the time. Just, you have to do it knowing it's the right thing to do. You have to do it knowing that it's okay if you don't get a response. Now, I would personally think of the company and wonder is now, do they fit my requirements for what I'm looking for if it's not something important to them? But it depends on the culture of the company.
Very good. And one hiring, let us know. And how should folks either reach out to you just to sort of get more advice, and thank you, frankly, for your time here. And which positions are you hiring for, if you want to mention those?
So as we go through the pandemic, like many companies, we're very enthusiastic about the people that are going to be, and the companies that are going to be using our product, but we're cautiously optimistic. We don't want to overhire and then be in a kind of a bloated spot if this continues much longer. So we've slowed down our hiring a bit. All of our roles that we have open are on our career site, which is gainsight.com/careers, a great way to look at them. And we have offices in the US, the UK, Tel Aviv, and India. So there's anywhere that that's hearing my voice now could probably look at roles, and we're open to remote workers. It's always a great thing. Or you can reach out to me on LinkedIn, or if you want to send me an email directly, my email is don@gainsight.com. Feel free to, and I'd be more than happy to answer any additional questions.
Fantastic. Don Thorvund, I want to thank you for going over quota and for breaking a little bit of the mold today and going Facebook Live. So I appreciate you rolling with me and taking that last second request, if you will.
Oh, it was a blast. I really enjoyed it. I'm very honored that you asked to meet with me, and I am so honored to be part of your guests.
Awesome. Thank you. And that's it, everybody. If you're listening on Facebook, goodbye. Thanks for watching. Otherwise, you will hear this on Over Quota soon. All right.